the niche that we are in will stay a niche, but it will be a niche not with 10,000 people, but a niche with 1 million people, and the capital base won't be like 1 trillion today, but 10 trillion. So it will be a niche compared to the stock market or the gold market or the real estate market. But it will be a niche big enough to have a global impact on communities, creators, and whoever else who could benefit from it. So again, stay in a niche, but a pretty fucking big niche. So let's just keep it that way. You can always, I think you cannot sit on 2 chairs at once, but you can let your friend sit on another chair. Hi, I'm Ivan. I'm currently in Gearbox. I was in crypto since 2017. Have always been on the marketing community shitposting side. So essentially anything that's not code, because like when you do marketing, business development, or community things, it's all quite intertwined. It's all about narratives and things, yeah. Have been with Gearbox. I'm one of the first 3 core contributors. People say co-founder sometimes. I just don't like saying it because I feel like people who work on the product and protocol itself are really the co-founders. I'm like the first LARP, really. Now we have more LARPs around. But yeah, also, of course, 24/7 in LobsterDAO. It's like a research chat, so no token there. That's just a
We're going to get into LobsterDAO in just a moment. I want to ask you, you said 2017. How did you get into crypto?
Like many people, I thought I was a genius investor when I bought some absolute scam coin. Made like a 7x on it immediately, but it was like, what, $50 7x, right? So was good money back then as a student. And then I was like, wow, I'm a genius investor. That was the peak, the end of 2017. Then it turned out I wasn't a genius investor, but I like crypto. It like got me involved. So I essentially started working in media back then. So like all the media copywriting things, stuff like that. Then thought, media, I want to be more involved. As a media, you have to stay impartial, right? Depends. That's what we were chatting 5 minutes ago, right, for a payment? No, just kidding. But yeah, got on the project side in the Netherlands, stayed in it for about 2-3 years, and then took a break for like half a year, and then thought, okay, let's do it again. So have been with Gearbox since February 2021.
Okay, and you mentioned the Netherlands. You used to live there, and now you live where?
In Dubai. So, but I don't do any Lambo flashy parties, Rolexes. As you can see, I'm wearing nothing. I don't like that. It's just for personal and tax reasons, obviously. There are a few reasons people go there, right?
Yeah. Can you talk to me about that thought process that you had of moving from Western Europe to the Middle East?
Yep. So before jumping into that, yeah, I came to Netherlands when I was 17 to study. I was on a scholarship there because I presumably was smart at school. Turned out it wasn't the case when you talk about European standards. Lived there for about 9 years. So I first studied there, then I had some part-time jobs, then I actually got a proper job. I think I switched a couple. And then at some point, it was around COVID time. There were a few reasons, like tax was of course one of them. The other one was Netherlands especially had a pretty terrible COVID response. I didn't like it. UAE, we can say many things about one or the other, right? But it had a very good response to that. So when I was properly suffocated in Amsterdam, the only place I could go to was Dubai. And later on, I was like, there is a huge expat community. Many founders moved there. Many made their base there. So again, I know like what people don't like about it, right? But there are also things that are nice about it. Many places have pros and cons, so you kind of have to balance them out, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned LobsterDAO there. Can you give me a brief overview of the origin story, perhaps, and what is it?
Yeah. So back in 2018, around summer, I was still just like learning everything. I didn't know what consensus algorithms were. I think I know now, which is a lie. But there was crypto code review chat back in the days. Andre Cronje, who was loved before. Now people, the new ones, seem to be not very much fans of him. I still am. He had a chat, crypto code reviews, where Bante, Milky Klim, and a few other Wire and core members at this point were. And they just like discussed stuff, and I was asking questions, learning, and also became admin. And Andre, as a creator and as a passionate guy at some point, was like, too much publicity, screw this shit, just even go delete the chat. I'm like, what? So he deleted the chat. And then I was like, listen, everybody who was in there still wants to like talk, right? And there wasn't any other chat back then. Because every chat people made was about selling your bags. And the point of that chat was not to do it. So yeah, I was like, can I just make a chat literally the same? He's like, yeah, sure, I don't care. So that's how LobsterDAO came around. It was Lobster's chat. No, actually, I think we called it LobsterDAO from the very beginning. But yeah, it was just, and it stayed the same for 5 years. Like, there is no shilling policy. Of course, people who are affiliated and work in projects, they sometimes have a bit of more leeway to talk about what they do. But if you're a new person, or if you ever talk about tickers, trading, TA, none of that is there.
And people can still join? Can people...
Yeah, it's totally open. It's totally open. There is like, when there was an NFT craze in the middle of 2021, was it? Yeah. People said, make an NFT. I was like, that sounds like a bad idea. They were like, a couple really got together, just literally made something. I'm like, Ivan, can you just edit? I'm like, okay, like there was like no mint fee, nothing, well, except gas fee. But there wasn't any fundraise, so people who were in the chat for a while got the NFT. And after some point, they said, okay, we'll make like a private chat where NFT holders can be. So it exists, I think, out of 2,500 holders, so 1,500, it depends, right? Some are bots, some have a couple of wallets, I don't know. 800 are actually in that private chat. There is no alpha per se, but if things are like what you see in public chats is sometimes people can't openly talk about everything, right? There is a degree of reservation you have to not really like shitting somebody, right? You have to be at least be more polite. There people go a bit further, so the idea was that people wanted to discuss whatever topics are discussed, but also from the investing perspective, kinda, which is usually a shitstorm if you try to do it in a public chat. So there, people can discuss that, but it has been bear market, so there wasn't much investing to do, right? It was mostly building. But yeah, I think later on, if the market picks up, there will be differentiation. So the chat started, as I mentioned, when Andre just said delete theirs and delete his, and everybody still needed a place to chat and like discuss things. Again, not trading, not investing, but more so just economic concepts, governance concepts, DAOs, whatever, like all of the conceptual things people try to do. So that's how LobsterDAO started. So everybody who was in that chat, many people jumped into that one. At this point, they are OG, right? It was summer 2018, so people have survived at least 1.5 cycles to this point. Yeah, it stayed without shilling essentially throughout this time because the issue you see with public chats is if you don't have any moderation, it immediately turns into shitstorm. That is how forums were back in the days, right? If a forum has no moderation, as soon as it slightly starts popping off, it's going to be an absolute shitstorm. That is what happened with I don't know who Vitalik was trying to make it with, but there were a few people who started Nakamoto chat on Telegram as well. But moderation is something you need to like. It's a weird thing, right? Like, you know, the Discord mod memes, they don't apply to LobsterDAO admins, but just that people in LobsterDAO, they have work in crypto. So they are by default on Telegram, more or less 24/7. So those are admins at the same time. So because there was a core community initially that somewhat shared values, they tried to bring it further. And obviously there is a big degree of subjectivity, but you can't go without it really. So a degree of subjectivity and some ethos, I know it's very like convoluted alignment, right? Alignment, that's the thing, stays there, but it has to be there because subjective topics when you discuss and like at what point is it overshilling, right? At what point are you skewing the opinion too much your way without really proper arguments? These are very subjective things. That's like how that's why panels are fun, right? Because there is subjectivity from every side being involved. So yeah, every once a quarter a person jumps in and says, oh my God, this is terrible, you're all bad admins, this is just full control, this is authoritarian regime, you don't let people discuss, but somehow, like Dan Robinson from Paradigm Uniswap sometimes jumps in, Michael Yegorov from Curve is pretty much always there, Andre, when he was more public in Telegram, was there. He's still there, but like not all the time. And a bunch of other founders because, again, Nakamoto was the only attempt to do it, and they realized quickly that you need people, many people, 24/7, wanted to do this shit. And it has to be for free. As soon as you introduce even a tiny economic incentive in there, it somehow goes bust after a while. I guess media, you guys on the media side, right? You also experience that, right? There is a very thin line, a very thin edge, and it's always very unclear at the beginning. But yeah, many projects have sourced the initial community members from LobsterDAO because there are, first of all, there are a lot of people, probably from 20,000 though, like at least half are bots, as usually with internet it goes these days. But yeah, Curve Finance was one of the projects that kind of launched. It was a very funny story. I think actually Defiant had a piece on it 3 years ago at this point. Yeah, 3 years ago at this point, where somebody found the contracts. I think it was Igor, who is now in Wintermute/Paradigm Research. He found the contracts on chain and was like, this looks one-to-one as the deployment scripts and whatever on GitHub. And then he asked about it, and people in Curves, all like related to Curve, said like, no, it wasn't. So he was like, okay, whatever. And then a few hours later, we're like, no, it really looks the same. And then some Curve members were in the chat, and they were like, We don't know, maybe somebody deployed it, because the way it was done is practically anybody could deploy it. But it was new that somebody would just randomly deploy. So people didn't believe in it. And it all happened during the night of Europe. It was around from 12 a.m., from midnight in Central Europe to about 9 a.m. It was that shitstorm happening. And it was happening all in LobsterDAO chat, then people realized that, wow, these contracts are there. They are somewhat real. There was a bigger belief that they're real. Then people saw that the farming starts in a few hours. I think it was a few hours after deployment. It wasn't exactly immediately. And then, front end wasn't exactly up for a couple of hours. When the front end launches on mainnet, it's always buggy. So you need to give it a couple of hours. And then, then it picked up. And a few people were still didn't believe in it for a day or two. What do you mean? It just randomly launched.
I want to ask you if that's one of the major milestones and achievements and highlights. What's one of the low points?
Difference between community and organization, right? In organization, you can expect something concrete, or at least try to make something concrete. In communities, as soon as you turn communities from the abstract, chaotic thing, which is only kept by a few ethos lines and a few expectations and a few people maybe, then it becomes a shitstorm. So that's why I guess in the main chat there was never any issue, because there was never a push to do something concrete. Because if you have something concrete, like with protocols, right? Immediately, if you fail expectations, that is a low point. Here, the only expectation is how much alpha and interesting stuff gets shared, and that is cyclical with the market. When the market is down, other people are just building, there is lack of publicity, there is lack of things done publicly, devs are just deving. And at the top, I guess a low point, at the high point, can be is that too much spam gets shared because people are, oh my God, there's a food farm, or there's this farm, there's something else. But no, in LobsterDAO, there's not that much of it, I would say. I'm pretty happy with how things have been. And, but 24/7 crawling the chat, 5 years through,
Maybe you can introduce GearDAO.
So Gearbox is, there are a few ways to describe it. It's like an on-chain credit protocol or composable leverage protocol. The way we have found to be really clicking with people and easier to understand it is imagine if your leveraged wallet had 10x the amount of funds in it. So you boost your wallet, supercharge your wallet. There are a bunch of technical conceptual things, but the idea is that you get leverage in a non-isolated way. Essentially, you get more capital, and then you go trade, farm, make positions, make whatever you want in a fully composable way, meaning you can make positions interact with each other in whatever. Unlike vaults, which are pretty much deposit and wait, or perpetuals, which are pretty much open position and just balance it. Here, it's more about full user freedom to do with that more capital whatever you want, whatever within permissions. And there it gets a bit more technical,
Okay, and as an individual who's been in this space for quite a while, what's your favorite aspect of Gearbox then?
Composability. Composability gets frowned upon because the more composable you are, it's you're as strong, how do they say it? You're as weak as the weakest chain in the link, or you're as strong as the weakest chain. It's one of those two, that's the point. So composability has that downside. But without composability, I would say crypto wouldn't have happened, right? The entire point why this is all cool is because it's open, interacts with each other, and so on. So that's what I liked about Gearbox. Because I have been investing is a strong word, right? Shitcoin angeling. Of course, the founders I like, they're not shitcoins. I just call it that way, right? Yeah. To me, everything not ETH and BTC is a shitcoin, Gear included. Is that I've seen enough narratives. I see the narratives all the time because when you're on BD marketing side, you need to understand narratives. You are in them as well. So I would say it plays well with just other startups. So in the last 3 years, I haven't seen anything where I would be I would jump into that. I would just rejump. No, I still think Gearbox it's a very composable protocol. It's generalized, meaning you can do a bunch of different things and you can twist parts of its modular stack so much that you just get leverage farming or margin trading without perpetuals or house trading against you. Or you can do composable vaults position rebalancing. You can do you can rebuild Unibot or these bots without having the key management security issues. So because it's so composable and you can play around and twist it, I don't think it will get boring anytime soon,
Very interesting. And you mentioned narratives there, so I'm curious which narratives you're following at the moment in the DeFi space.
When it comes to DeFi, I feel like a bunch of concepts were already built to a decent extent reasonably well. So you can always re-optimize it. You can do gas optimization. You can make fees lower. You can make capital efficiency higher. Not sure that is a 1x improvement. Or 1x improvement makes no sense. 1.1x improvement, right? Rather than a 10x. So 10x, I don't know what. There are a few narratives within DeFi that are pretty much have been there for a few years already. one of them, let's start with the least used one, options, right? There was some options hype. I think apart from a few people on Deribit, nobody does that yet, right? Perpetuals now picked up a bit more, but mostly a lot the reason, I guess, there's because every different layer 2 gives rewards to that, so volumes pick up. For complex instruments to be used, I feel like market needs to get more sophisticated. How much sophistication do we get? Every second trader is a degen at the same time, farming and shitcoining, right? That's not market sophistication. There are no like interest rate swaps in crypto because there are no concurrent yield sources, right? It's all cyclical. It's all based on volatility. As such, it's all based on funding rates, and that like all follows one another, right? There is no like different segments within DeFi. It's just like all cyclical. So cycle up, everybody lost protocol, cycle down, zero gets used. In normal financial world, it's a bit more like dispersed, right? You have like even value stocks which work during the bad market. You have the growth stocks and a different one. You have a few different ones, and then the flows among them can work differently. In crypto, it's pretty much just like all goes together, right? It's all correlated really for now. So that's why maybe a lot of these things were built but are not being used. It doesn't mean they have to be rebuilt. It's just that it was a bad timing for them to launch.
Okay, and is that your main frustration if you observe the DeFi space? You mentioned market sophistication and a few more points there. What would you say is the main frustration you have?
I can give a boring reply to that. I'm more like a very concrete one is the UX, right? Because, well, that is interesting to discuss because UX in this case is when you talk about DeFi, when a team starts something, due to how fundraising works and narratives work, they need to make the narrative as large as possible, right? Do you buy an infrastructure coin or do you buy an interface coin? Interface coin haven't done that well, right, kind of. Fat layer thesis has done much better. So at the start, you have to push yourself as a protocol, as generalized, composable. I'm not comparing it to Gearbox, but to an extent, I wasn't saying it was the reason, but you do start doing that. Once you've done it, you have to have actually users. So you need products built on top of your protocols that obfuscate all of that complexity, modularity, and whatever into one single button, right? Not 100 buttons on the interface. It's like Google or Uniswap. It's one. And to do that, once you have been, let's say you focus 2 years on the protocol, as generalized integrations for everything, right? All of that, blah, blah, blah. Not blah, blah, blah. Very concrete blah, blah. But still, it's not a one button. And then you literally have to change your focus into one button thing. And that's the issue, that switching from that to that, first of all, it's difficult. Second, it takes a lot of time. So if you look into the fundraising cycle, even if you did like seed, private, Series A, it's only barely enough to actually finish it all. And by the end of the time, if you are not ready, you might not be having a chance anymore. And then the new team that starts, they actually start from protocol, narrative, big moon thing again. They have fallen into the same issue. So nobody ever looks at the end of the UX. And the UX is only looked by smaller teams who don't have maybe the capabilities to do a huge fundraise, and then as a result, they may be underfunded. So it's a bit of a, I would say it's the fault of the venture. It's not fault, right? It's more that it's an incentive. Show me the incentives, I show you the outcome, right? Because of how venture cycles work, that is why everybody's focusing on the big thing, and nobody works on the small thing that actually drives users. I guess Ethereum Foundation actually recognizes that and also looks at that one, right? Many of the grants are focused on that. Account abstraction, social recovery, all of that is focused on attracting the layman user, if you were to say so, like a normal user. So I wouldn't say there is anything that crypto people aren't working on that needs to be worked on, just that you can change focus, but as like the cycle shows, right? Too much infra, market goes down because no users, applications pop up, right? And then it goes like, I mean, you can imagine, yeah, whatever, something like that. I think people turn governance and lack apathy in governance as a frustration or is an issue to solve. I'm not sure it's something that needs solving because it's not like you have 100% of the population voting in the real world, right? So, okay, if you want to fix that, go fix that first. That's more important than protocol governance, right? Let's be honest. Country politics are more important to everyday's lives than the protocol. I'm not saying you should discard one over the other, but still it's pretty obvious that this is the case. The point is governance in DeFi or whatever protocols is open, right? So you can't technically go buy back or get it acquired somewhere else or get it delegated or work and get it right for a grant different ways. And then you can go vote. Obviously, because these protocols are finance related, the more tokens you have, the more weight you should hold. Like this is finance related, right? These are not social things. So if it's money related, the bigger money back should speak. So when people say like, oh, it's the rich get richer or it's the plutocracy or whatever, like, these are finance protocols. That's how it's supposed to be, like shareholders in the real world. Like, I'm not sure it should be different. If you talk about protocols, if they would be social related, like maybe ENS, right? You've seen the recent thing with ENS and Unstoppable Domains clash again. I guess, yeah, there it might make sense not to just have fully money-driven decisions. It's more ethos, reputation-based. But in DeFi, I don't think it should be different. People say, oh, but only 50 people vote and only who understand it. Okay, but it's open, right? You can't get involved. You can't do it. You don't need 500 people voting. Again, they can. You don't need to. You need to solve it per se. You can solve it by making it gasless. You can solve it by making the barrier to introduce lower, by having very open documentation, having good onboarding funnel and everything. That should be done in general. But you don't really have to go around and say, please go vote, please go vote. No, you don't want to vote? Don't vote. It's fine. Because as we have seen, once there is in governance, once there is the topic that is really edgy, somehow governance pops up, right? Somehow people actually go and they vote. Maybe just many of the votes that happen, people say, oh, it's the team deciding. Well, not team, but like contributors. It's because they care. And others, they can just not care, and then it just goes by, right? But if a topic really needs discussion, usually people somewhat have a look and like, oh, okay, this needs discussion. The rest, let it flow.
So you think it should be left to its organic way of proceeding?
I don't think you need thousands of voters, because end of the day, the thing is that even in real world, even if you have like 2x people voting, these people are still driven by the same marketing they see everywhere, by the same ideas, and of course people are all unique, but there are still subgroups within them, right? So if there are the same number of subgroups, but more people, doesn't practically change anything, right? Of course, it's great if there are, but if there are not, outcome is not going to be practically different. So if you have like thousands of people voting, sure, I mean, in 99% of cases, the outcome will be exactly the same.
What are your thoughts on token utility?
Last cycle before that, token utility did not exist, right? I mean, Maker had token utility from somewhere the start. Anybody else, it was nothing, right? Gas fees, I guess, right? It was an easy way out. Gas fees was the easy way out. You're a layer one blockchain. What is the token needed for? Oh, you stake it and you get more. Great. Who is going to stake it and pay transaction fees? Oh, somebody else building on top of us. Okay, but, it's okay, can get out. But if you're not a layer one and you don't really have gas fees, like what's then? And I guess an easy escape was governance, like, right? It's something that you can have from day zero. It is quite important. It's not bullshit. It's not exactly this thing people want to see, but it is important. It's just that the question is, if there is something that you're governing as valuable, how is value coming in? And people ask, okay, what about revenue sharing and stuff? I think depends per protocol, right? Social protocols like ENS, maybe they should just stay on governance because this is like a public good, and public good needs to be decided by a few parties like governance. Protocols, you can to an extent make it governless, right? Like Uniswap pools are governless, so you could do that. It's just that for lending protocols and a few others, there are a bunch of parameters involved in composability that probably some degree of intervention, again, not centralization, just intervention might stay. It will be becoming less and less, which is what everybody is working towards. It's just not today. But probably those tokens, whether they're in a staked form or like staked module in Aave, right, or the DCRV in Curve, which is like time-based, or some other models, point is revenues coming in. DeFi is finance. Finance takes fees. Finance is money. So if you're involved in that, it's logical for you to expect money. Just revenue sharing makes no sense once protocols make $100 a day, right? Like how much are you going to share? The only ones that could have shared would be YDX, but let's not touch upon that just yet. They probably would have if they could, but maybe not. I don't want to like completely support them, but also don't want to shit on it. The other ones were GMX that was doing it, right? The feedback loop. I think revenue sharing for DeFi is where people would want to see it go and where it probably should go. If you look into social, again, maybe governance is enough to be there. If you look into protocols, well, they're staking for reputation or whatever, like restaking, right, whatnot. Maybe that's a fine use case to be at. And you can always add stuff on top, like extra fees from something. So I just feel like it's early. There are no revenues. There are no concrete use cases. There are lack of users. You can't do revenue sharing or really fully figure out where the economic substance is because it's still early. Like a lot of work has been done, but it's still a long way to go. What's important, I feel like, is that many teams are working on cool stuff. Many teams have concrete vision of where they need to be. They check that vision with how adoption cycles maybe should be going. So it's not just abstract, like, oh, we're like gonna make a protocol and then like everybody's gonna reach and then hunger is gonna be solved around the world. No, it's pretty concrete things many different segments are working on for user adoption, for DeFi rails, for other stuff. So pretty positive on all of it, yeah. If you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield, as they say. In crypto, because there are, like if you look at RWA gives you sustainable yield like corporate bonds, right? Because companies are working, they're generating revenue, whatever, there is some distribution, there are some yields being paid, and that is somewhat regardless of the market cycle. Of course, the price of the bond can vary, but the yield usually is based on the coupon. You have, of course, a bunch of risks in there, but the point is, regardless of the cycles, as we mentioned before, there are many different instruments which have lesser or high yield, regardless of what cycle it is. But that means there is constant flow, there are constant things to do, there are constant things to rebalance. With crypto, it's a very cyclical market. Coin go up, many users, everybody happy. Coin go down, 0 users, nobody happy, everything is wrecked. Like funding rates, because of that, volatility is the driver of the yields, right? Essentially funding rates. So last cycle, I think funding rates for BTC and ETH long were like, or short were like what? Even at 100%, right, 50 plus. On centralized exchanges in the past few months, it was about 5, 10. So it's a huge collapse. Usually they should be about 10% plus, 20, right, 30, good range. Perpetual DEXs and DeFi protocols, so far perpetuals exceptionally, have been about 3x in the funding rate compared to sexes, right? Because again, the bigger the books, the lower you give, the smaller the books, the more you give because you have to balance it out. Crypto, for now, is still based on the cycles because most of the yield, why do people pay lending rate? Because they borrow, loop, whatever, hedge. Why do they hedge? Why do they borrow? It's because there is a lot of money being made, a lot of volatility. So it all comes back to that.
What do you think about the sustainability of yield?
So sustainability of yield depends on the different activities that are done within the space. And crypto for now is only based on volatility and like coin go up, coin go down. When coin go down, funding rates are terribly low. Coin go up, funding rates are insanely high, 50% plus. So it's a really huge discrepancy. And there is no recurrent activity, recurrent yield, like for example, corporate bonds paying you for capital, right? Which is like just fixed rate. Or like SME lending, which is fixed rate. The underlying can fluctuate, but the rates are based on the coupons. Crypto doesn't have that, right? So it is fully based on up, down, up, down. So when it's down, yields are ass, really bad. When it's up, yields are insane. Entire TradFi wants to put their mothers into crypto and like deposit everything they have and take bank loans like they have before. I'm not sure how exactly crypto will get to the point of having sustainable revenues, because for yields to be sustainable, you need to have revenues, right? There needs to be sustainable businesses to an extent, because if you only base it on volatility, all of the yields will slowly collapse, right? Nobody's buying options out of the normal price range anymore. The yields are lower, everything is lower, activity is lower. So it's again cyclical. You would need to have companies actually having products, actually with recurring revenues, for these flows to be more consecutive and stable and repeatable. I'm not sure next cycle will bring that just yet. This cycle already we have obfuscated funding rates into different segments already. Of course, a lot of it is based on the token emissions because, again, it's still only a few thousand users really who are using it. Liquidity is still very small. You still need to bootstrap it. There are still not really huge revenues happening. So token bootstrap is a big thing. Which is okay, right? It lets people take part in something new. And if their bet is right, or if the protocols they hold are good, then yeah, fantastic. If not, well, they can always be consecutively selling the yield. So yeah, yields are not sustainable in crypto. I'm not sure if they exactly can be. If more RWA is brought into crypto, that of course makes that more sustainable, right? It will not be crypto native, but it will be taken from the outsource. An interesting trend in DeFi and how it was happening before compared to now is before, like you had pools, right? And you were like mostly like pool to pool or person to pool because it was easier to aggregate liquidity and easier to aggregate demand and supply side. How lending protocols were, how AMMs were. Now, because the space still grew, it's still small, but it still grew, it's easier to do P2P stuff. Meaning there are a bunch of different offers on demand side, a bunch of different offers on the supply side. Means you can do RFQ, request. Actually, I don't know how RFQ abbreviation goes. Anyway, RFQ based, we can check that later. So it's like this intents, right? Like I intend to trade something at this price or within this price range. I intend to lend something within this API, whatever. And as such, things can be even more composable without freezing the assets at one point in time. And also the trades can be done easier. And they can also be done cheaper. For example, you can just do gasless transactions as they have been with CowSwap and 1inch Fusion in the last few months, because the gas fee can be obfuscated or taken into the slippage, or rather the spread, however you correctly pointed out. That makes user experience better, because you, for example, wouldn't even need to have gas fees even for that. So if you have account abstracted wallets, you don't even need to sponsor transactions like SNX has done it with Argent back when it just popped up in around 2020, 2021. You can just not do that even in the first place, and it is just obfuscated. It is a question of how decentralized that is, because all of these intents and whatever trades and routes are done by solvers who are pretty much prop desks to an extent. So you are centralizing it. And the question is how open that. I'm going to be really perverting the terms here, like not the mempool really, but the pool of where the intents are aggregated, how many people and how open that space is. If it is fully open, it's fine that it's being solved by a few parties. But if, like with flashbots to an extent, right, more and more is like kind of centralized, sure, that is the exact way to go. But it is better for user experience, essentially, yes. So I'm not as big brain to understand that much. It's just an interesting thing to see. It does make applications more user-friendly. Without doing much, and it does make cross-chain interactions also easier, because again, if you just all bundle it into intents, that is semi-off-chain stuff, even if it is on-chain. So a lot of shortcuts can be made in order to make user experience still better. When I got in this space, I was introduced to Ledger, and I've been okay with it ever since. I'm not sure if getting. So I'm not a hardware guy, nor a software guy, really, to be honest. But I'm not sure if getting like the new ones, Ledger, are really safe, because maybe in the past few years after crypto grew, some stuff at the factory could be like inputted. But then if that was really possible before, you could just fix it with forcing an update on it, right? So I'm not sure if that exactly makes a difference. Mm-hmm. But I would just try to buy, like, every industry gets towards centralization, right? Like them trying now to say, oh, AI needs to be controlled. So the early stuff is always more pure than what happens later.
So get yourself an old school first generation ledger.
I'm not sure they even sell. I mean, even if they sell those anymore, it depends on how back in the days they were made. If it's a new print run, even if it is not discontinued, I'm not sure that makes sense. I don't know hardware and software connections that deep enough, but I would think that what was done before was done by people who were for decentralization. So there is a higher chance of nothing shitty being in there. With the new stuff, yeah, I would say there is a higher degree. It's a bit of a tinfoil hat on, you know. But yeah, Ledger, I've never done Trezor, and I think it's fine, because I guess in the past 3 years, there have been a few cases where they said, listen, Trezor is somewhat easier penetratable compared to Ledger, yeah. But the best way to go with this is what people say, is you make safe accounts, just with a few wallets of your own. And what is easier when you try to, let's say you want to change your ledger, or you somehow accidentally messed up your private key and copy-pasted it somewhere, you can just replace that wallet, right? So your address, like your smart contract account on a safe, is the same. You just change the signers. So you can change jurisdiction, your MetaMask, whatever you want. You change the signers, but the thing stays the same. So you don't have to always migrate the funds. It's a bit harder to manage. But again, if you're talking about ultimate security, safe with a few signers, even if they are yourself, it's just a better UX-friendly way for yourself once you try to transition. Because you probably had a wallet, right? And then you transition to a new one because your computer was breached, right? Some virus was installed. You need to send all of your shitcoins to a new one, right? There is a service that I think now helps it on chain to send a few at a time. But again, here you don't need to do it. You don't. And you can make it as safe as possible. You can later on introduce signers that, I don't know, your lawyer, your grandmother, your family members, and it would still be in there. You don't need to always move, which is, I guess, better UX, yeah.
And speaking of cycles, are we out of the bear market? When bull?
I have no clue. Like, I probably put a target for myself that if there is no bull by, let's say, autumn 2025, I'd like consider not spending that much time on crypto. Because we are, of course, dependent on cycles. I'm not talking about BTC being at 1 million, but if it stays at the same level without new segments popping up, right? Listen, it's one thing where BTC and ETH just stay flat and a bunch of new segments pop up and the industry grows. Usually growth of the industries is still fueled by a few core ones going high. So that doesn't happen from at this point, beginning of 2022 to 2025. Pretty much that 4-year thing that people believe in. It's not that you need to believe in, it's just that capital also runs out, right? Many of the protocols, so apps already run out of capital, right? Protocols are, give or take 2 years runway, which is still good. Foundations like layer 1s and layer 2s, no, they're funded for like the next 200 years. So they will survive and they will keep doing the grants, but something will need to be done, right? They're not gonna have the money for the next 5 years. So in the next 2, 3, nothing happens, teams will be like, maybe I'm like in the wrong space, right? A lot of people did leave for AI, right? It's not a joke. Like a lot of people did go into AI. A bunch of devs at the hackathon are also doing somewhat AI things. Devs also like new shiny shit, right? It's not only shitcoiners like us that like new shiny stuff. They also like to work on new shiny stuff. If no new user comes into your old thing before for like consecutively 4 years, it's not really fun to work on it, yeah. I'm not a dev, I'm just paraphrasing what they say, you know.
What excites you about the crypto space then in the next few years? What are the narratives that really you think could drive some change?
Yep. So I feel like DeFi still will be the main, because at the end of the day, if it is an industry which is insanely connected to finance, right, all of the infrastructure, all the gas fees, whatever, even if you obfuscate it and abstract from end users, it's still gonna be the underlying thing. So DeFi is basically the finance implementation of it all. So if the industry leaves, finance will grow with it really, really hard. And that's what DeFi is. So that's why I'm still in DeFi. I think it's going to be not the biggest, but like it's not going to go anywhere. Other things that are interesting is when there's a bunch of, do we count infra as a different thing? I guess so, right? But infra is there to enable DeFi and other use cases, right? So I'm not sure if we...
It's part of a greater whole,
Part of the greater, yeah, exactly. I don't think I believe in social that much, to be honest. Like whenever like Farcast or somebody else does it, like, oh, we're going to make a new decentralized social media. I believe in the thing that is related to the gas fees kind of thing, right? If you're a Bitcoin holder, people were saying, oh, like Ethereum, right? Oh, why would you use it if you only have $10? Yeah, you don't use the main layer then. It's obvious. You don't use it if you have $10. It's for the more valuable the thing you have is, the higher you're going to pay to move it or to store it, which is obvious. For some social cases, it can be obfuscated. But social cases like your tweet or your message doesn't really carry that much economic substance in it, right? Of course, people can say, oh, the first week of Jack on Twitter was sold for how much? The meme thing, it was like $1 or $2 million, right? When he was trying to sell tweets or something?
I'm not sure about the numbers, no, but I'm curious actually on this point, why you think then, if these numbers are being generated, why will SocialFi not survive?
No, SocialFi and just social stuff, right? Like decentralized media or other things. Not to say anything bad about the teams working on it, it's just that UX is a huge pain point, and decentralized systems, I don't know, however you abstract it, are going to be worse than centralized ones, right? Whenever you get a new iPhone these days, you can immediately feel how 0.001 second it is faster than your old, and you see that as a user, right? Decentralized stuff has this the trilemma again. I'm not Illuminati, just pointed out. It's a different thing for the same purpose. Or rather, this different purpose, the same thing, yeah. You cannot just make it faster, right? Like decentralized exchanges are not going to be as efficient as centralized one. Going to be always slightly worse. They have other pros and cons. And I just don't feel like your tweets or your media presence is something you really hold on to, except the big influencers. But the big influencers like, I don't know, what is it, Mr. Beast on YouTube, right, TikTokers and whatever, I believe that's where more users will be. Because you always, like if you look at adoption, right, the most regulated, the most mainstream things are very centralized because governments or whatever, blah, blah, whoever you want to blame, want to have control over it. That's where 90% of users will be. And for social media, it has to aggregate towards that. So if you only have like a few users on the decentralized one, sure, it can live, like no issue, right? It's like DeFi will probably be to, not protocols, right, but to an extent, interfaces, whatever, will be the largest and regulated. So a lot of capital will be. It doesn't mean that the small part of it won't be still huge. It's just that comparatively it will be smaller. And I feel like for social media, you really have to be the biggest one, because if you're the smaller one, I mean, it's not that fun, right? You need to interact, it's social. So that's why I don't buy that much into it, I don't know. But I can see why people work in it. I can see, or at least I can imagine if your use case has been very valuable, just not really my king.
Social maybe isn't very high on your list of narratives to follow. What about GameFi? What about RWAs? Is there anything else on your radar?
Yeah, so RWAs, all of this on-chain T-bills, right, SME lens and whatnot. I have a couple of bags, I guess. And good teams, like I would say many teams who are surviving to this point are pretty good and like genuine, with some small exceptions, but it's not as was in the bull market. RWA, I believe in it from the perspective that it will be there. because that is where bankers and managers make their money. So if there is something they can make more money on without changing their business, they'll do it, right? So they just slide it in, basically. So there is no reason not to have it. Do I like it or not? No, I think like probably in DeFi, the next big boom, I guess, and the next big huge bust will be due to some centralized underwriter, not properly done like SBF was, right? Completely wrecking it all to shit. I believe that is very, very, very much going to happen, but not today, not tomorrow. We already see it happening in small things, right? It's just that when a credit collapse would happen maybe again, crypto would be much more exposed to it, right? Because it won't have like 1,000 participants like in real world to be like only a few, and being one of a few is worse than one of 1,000 failing for the industry as a whole. What other stuff within DeFi? Well, like options, perps, and other sophisticated stuff, right? There, I believe they weren't done not because protocols were bad, but because market does not have enough sophistication. Same goes for interest rates, swaps, whatever instruments you have in real world can totally be done in crypto, almost in the same way, maybe just architecturally different, more composable. But for now, I believe there are only a few thousand users who are active every day, who really know why they need DeFi and whatever. And it's just, there is not enough sophistication for other things to be there. As for GameFi, a bunch of my friends are like hardcore on GameFi, they still believe in it. I'm not really a huge gamer myself. Like, I mean, I play Fortnite 6 hours every day, which sounds like I'm a nerd, yes. But that's it. The other games I played were just like, I played Magic the Gathering back in the days, like a lot. My entire university was wasted on that. Literally, like I played also 6 hours a day. I didn't study at all. Now we have like for GameFi, we have games trying to be done with like this, Steam, but fully composable between games. There I feel like it's an issue of incentives alignment. Why would you make it composable with other games if you can always sell new? It's better to constrict marketplaces between each other for the purposes of companies making revenue. And people often disagree with it. And then you can use a prime example of Magic the Gathering, where you have to balance the two, right? You have to print new cards, because that's where revenue for the company comes, as well as collectors. It's called trading collectible game, or TCG, right? Trading collectible game, whatever. And the collectible part is if you overprint, which is what Hasbro has done in the past 3 years. All the prices of cards, they completely tank, and then people really hate it. So there is a balance. But yeah, I can see those two things work. There are projects working on this which are cool. Like Unchained Gods was before, right? Parallel being now. In GameFi normal, I know there are a bunch of games. I'm not such a gamer to really tell the difference between Fortnite, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, right? There are many different segments, but I'm not sure why. I get it when people say why they need to be decentralized. I'm not sure I, as a gamer, even care. Like,
right. This is actually something that came up in a few conversations where the people that we're trying to onboard to bring into the space, in a way, the sort of prevailing consensus is that they shouldn't even know the underlying technology that they're interacting with. If it's a game and we want to use GameFi as perhaps a way to onboard more people, it should just be a fun game that people want to play.
Yep.
And they shouldn't know that they're using a blockchain technology or using various forms of technology that underlies it. What are your thoughts on that?
Makes sense. I think for DeFi and finance, even in the real world, people who engage with it, unless they're putting in some mutual funds, they still kind of get it, right? If you buy people, like normal people who have jobs, like we do have jobs, right? I mean, like normal people outside of the space. When they put something in T-bills, they somewhat learn what T-bills are, right? Especially all the shit in finance has been happening in the past, 3 years? A lot of people got more educated in where their money actually is, how it works. So that is progressing. And so in DeFi, I don't think you of course have to abstract it from the user to make it easier, but people will be learning about it anyway, so it's fine. For games, I don't think they need to be learning the blockchain, right? Here it's finance, so you need to know what finance does. In game, you don't need to know how the thing behind it happens and the transactions, whatever. That has to be obfuscated. And I guess it would work for a few very specific game genres, right? For some games, you don't need to do it. I feel like the games that have been successful, apart from maybe Parallel to an extent, a few others these days, I'm not shilling, although I do have a back, so, is that they're trying to bring this AAA games to blockchain and just say this is now going to be AAA on the blockchain. I don't think it should be done, maybe. The games that were successful were related to like GameFi, right? Like Fugazi gambling related with games. That I can see because it's different from real world. Now, whether that has a huge player penetration or not, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, but at least that is unique. So people get drawn to it. If you just say we have legal legends on the blockchain, I don't think that entices anybody, right? Oh, your character is now fully decentralized and you can sell your stuff. You're like, if they want to sell, they'll find ways to sell, right? With Steam, it's Steam, right? The marketplace thing. That one, if that allows to sell it, people can trade it enough. Like you can sell codes or whatever, like it works to an extent. It doesn't fully efficiently work, maybe because it doesn't need to.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned bags there, so I'm gonna bring our attention back to it. What's your biggest bag at the moment?
I mean, Gearbox, right? But okay, if you count what is invested as the biggest bag. I try to do angel checks all in a similar range. I don't do that many, so I don't like invest all around like SBF style. I have quite a few projects, like I would say couple a quarter, which I wouldn't say that often. Most in DeFi because I don't like investing when I don't understand what I do. And of course, there have been investments where I wasn't really helpful as an angel. Happens. I feel bad about it, but usually I try to like offer some perspective or expertise, right, if I had any, or some opinion. So because I do DeFi, it's mostly related to DeFi.
Mostly in the DeFi space. Okay, and can you share any alpha right now?
And it is related to what we discussed, right? The narratives I think are interesting. Of course, the bags would be related to that. Put your mouth where your money is.
Money where your mouth is.
Yep. Okay. That also sounds good. Yeah. Put your mouth wherever, so it makes you money. That's a different way to twist it. Bear market makes us do stuff. RWA, you have a couple of bags, not that many. With RWA, it's like I feel like it's pretty straightforward what happens there. People who work in RWA, like there is of course some T-bills, there is some SME lending, there is some other stuff. Because it's such an old industry, there is not like some, wow, 10x, right? It's more so putting whatever in real world into DeFi. Pretty straightforward. There I have a couple. I think it will grow a lot, but probably the biggest players will take the most market share because that is a lot of based on trust, right? It's not like a few different DeFi protocols which don't necessarily need to have the biggest trust. It's just there. It is related to papers. And when you want papers, you want to have like, I don't know, a 70-year-old who has done that shit for 50 years, right? That at least they know it. You don't want 15-year-olds running around with some LLCs and stuff, right? That's literally the opposite because you go for safety. And we have a wrong perception of safety, but because this is RWA and it's related to legal documents, you want people who have done stuff with legal documents, as boring as that may sound. I'm not sure if there is, I have a couple of AMM bags investments, mostly because I like teams and I know they have a huge presence in the space. I shouldn't call the names, right, just not to shill it. Yep. I don't think beyond that there is really much new to do with AMMs. Like many people, researchers themselves are saying like, yeah, it's like there is like concentrated AMM, right? There is one for long tail, there is one for short tail. Probably you don't need to optimize it even further. Like what we have today with like Curves, Uniswaps, Mavericks, UniB4, and a couple of other things. Volantis, I think the newer one, called the bag. Maybe that's enough, maybe that's enough. Of course, Banker doing a different thing. There are many different, how do they call it? Many different flavors of that. Yes. Maybe I don't need 100, 10 maybe is okay. Of course, 100 will be done, but I'm just saying that it doesn't need to be 100. How many stable swaps with concentrated AMM like Curve do you need? Okay, let's have more than 1, 2, right? For security or whatever, and maybe 3 which is specialized. You don't need 10. That's, again, yep. The one thing that is an obvious realization that not necessarily took me a while, but wasn't in exact things, like you can have different perception whether you invest based on just narrative and you don't care who is executing it, or you just invest in executors. Seasoned investors understand you need to be doing the execution-related one, right? Because ideas are cheap, even though they're not cheap. Many ideas are just a very hot thing. They can fall through in 2 years. So even though the idea was right, timing was right, execution was bad. That idea can always be taken later by a better execution team. Maybe in crypto, that thesis is slightly more skewed towards 50-50, is because the space is insanely narrative-driven. So often, teams that have the best execution but not the right narrative, they don't have enough time to switch the narrative into the right one later. And even though they were very smart, well executed, they are not in the right place in the right time. You could argue that the best execution team will also understand to execute the narrative differently, right? You could say that. So, I don't know, you always, to know whether a team is very well at executing or not, you also need to know them for a long time, right? And the space is still new, so there are not that many teams that have 10 people who worked for 10 years here, right? You don't have that much backlog to look into. So it's very much superficial in how you base that opinion, yeah. I mean, venture capital in general is a lot of subjectivity involved. In crypto, it's even more subjectivity. Because of cycles, it's even more subjectivity. So I think the best backs that have performed for me the best were the ones that I least expected, quite literally. Except maybe one or two, the rest were just fully like, I was like, huh? Yeah.
Since you've arrived here, how do you see the crypto landscape being different in Turkey from compared to other countries, perhaps?
I wouldn't say I particularly know that much difference between Turkey's landscape and Turkey and other countries. I know that many users, especially those who care about the monetary value of this, right? Which is, I mean, we all do. Just that many traders are in Turkey, as they are, like, for example, in Ukraine, Russia, right, in China. Okay, in many of these places now, you cannot even do it directly. But basically, I know there is a huge adoption scene here. A big part of the population uses crypto for, I guess, similar reasons as Latin America countries have, right? Because of the inflation, which is great. I feel like crypto projects are very much failing Turkish community for now, because many are focused on the abstracted narratives about infra and stuff. Turkish users actually want to be users, right? So people are saying, oh, but they're gambling a lot with this, and like other nations could do that. But like, yeah, they need to kind of, like, that's the point. That's where they see the biggest adoption, so focus on it. So at Gearbox, we understand it, it's just that we had to build the stack first, which we are now pretty much at the final stage, because rebuilding core every year is not a fun thing. The cycles of shipment are insanely large, and insanely long and insanely expensive. So now it's going to be finally focusing on what users are asking for. I have seen, of course, on the adoption spectrum is that many of the stores and everything have like this USDT sign or something else, which is pretty cool. I don't think I have ever seen it anywhere. Like in Europe, where Europe doesn't really have that in general, right? I guess, no, Turkey is part of Europe, whoever you ask depends, right? Exactly. So I mean, like in Western European countries, you don't see that, yeah. So it was really pretty interesting to see, yeah. I like the idea, like I didn't get it before, like for example, why was an event done in Bogota, right? And why was an event done in Taiwan? Why is not Turkey? Why they can just do in Amsterdam all the time? Obviously, there are many different communities around the world. Communities are very different, people are very different. It's very cool that actually it is done globally in different places. Of course, I can say it would be great if more stuff was done with the attention to local cuisine, I don't know, people, culture, whatever else. But at the same time, teams who are working in this space, a lot of it is business-oriented, right? You have shortage of time, you have shortage of capital, you have shortage of people at the spot. So that's why people just choose Hiltons of this world or whatever else that is like a westernized hotel, because you can communicate better and do, you know what you expect, right? Like that's why you go to Starbucks in another country. You know the caramel frappuccino you're gonna get, right? Which is bad and good at the same time, right? Like we would have done somewhere in a more local place with a more local thing, but we just had some random, not random, but like a normal hotel. Mm-hmm. So I can't even say that you could expect of projects to really do that, because they don't have dedicated people for that. Startups are small, right? You cannot, it's not a core thing you need to be doing, so sadly it is missed. I mean, food was great. I like Turkish food, because like Uzbek, Russian, Ukrainian food, Turkish, I would say a lot is meat-based. I like meat, sorry. That sounded wrong. I like the Turkish tea. Although when I had 2 in a row on an empty stomach, I sat down and I was like I was like almost on fire. People like friends who have families like, listen, this is you aging. This is called like high heartbeat, really high heartbeat, because of that. I was like, holy wow.
Just from Turkish tea?
On an empty stomach, 2 in a row after coffee.
Wow, okay.
So it's just like huge
caffeine
huge
overdose.
Caffeine overdose, yeah.
You're attending as a partner. Tell me about that. How's the experience been?
There we go. Falling down the entire time like this, yeah.
So you're here as a partner. How's that experience?
They were Gearbox also as a partner sponsor back in Amsterdam in April 2021. So ETHGlobal events are done exceptionally well. I don't even think they even make that much money. Like they probably break even and plus, but knowing Kartik and the other team members who would have been doing just shitcoins 24/7 or just investing, it's hell probably. Like this is just like, I know even doing merch as simple as hoodies, it's already stressful. How to do merch, put everyone together, venue, security, whatever. I can't imagine. Like even a side event, like we had a side event with Gearbox, Diva, Aragon, and Liquidity, great teams as well, and thanks to them for doing all the work and choosing the place, because they had a person locally. Otherwise, like it's really hectic experience to do all of that. Yeah. No, it's great. The partner experience has been great. Always great attention to detail. They managed to give the time to everybody. Everything is done safely, on point. Food actually here in Istanbul and Turkey was much better than at other ETHGlobal events. I remember back in Amsterdam in 21, food was so bad, it was disgusting. Not anything bad about ETHGlobal, probably more so stone into the Dutch way, right?
Yeah. Dutch cuisine isn't exactly known for being stellar or renowned.
Here it is, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, not guess. I know. I ate all of it. Yeah.
I'm happy they leveraged the local cuisine to actually bring people here, and they've used it as well. It's been absolutely brilliant. And on the topic of the hoodie, I'm wearing one right now. Thank you very much. I think they're great. I'm guessing you designed it.
No. Actually, the illustrator for Gearbox from the start has been my sister. Not because I try to hire my own family members, nothing like that. It's just that just easier to work with an illustrator, easier to work with creative people once you have worked before. Because whenever you say, oh, do a pic, like, you know how like the creative assignment goes, right? Oh, so do this picture, and there's like this thing, and you put it in here, and then like that. If you never work with the person, they'll be like, the hell do you want? So you either spend a lot of time giving an exact sketch, or they have done stuff with you before that they know that you are a moron, but they can put it visually, you know? You do creative stuff when you do videos as well, right? Whenever it comes to somebody new asking for something, although I don't know if you really come across that, but basically, you know what I'm talking about, yeah. You need like a level of communication there. Yeah.
Certainly. I'm curious, what are the main topics that have been covered here? There's various hackathons, people are building, people are coming out with proposals. What are some projects maybe that have caught your eye?
Majority, I would say there was very much little new DeFi. And again, that is all related to stuff we discussed before, which is the adoption cycle, not venture cycle. Because all of it is startups have to appeal to investors in the first stage. And when the market is bearish, you cannot build apps because you have no users to use them. So basically you build an app and you will raise exactly zero because they'll be like, oh, you're an app. That means you need to have users. Well, users, zero, buy. As an infra, you're selling shovels, right? And shovels are good to be sold both in bear and in bull. You can sell shovels in any cycle of the market. It will always work, just sometimes better, sometimes worse. So the last 1.5 years, venture activity throughout the entire world wasn't exactly high, except AI. So in crypto, it has been degrading. I think the last couple of months, because of market picking up, it slightly got better, but not much better. A lot of it is infra. So infra, which is abstract things, very cool stuff, right? There is some, if you consider risk-taking cool, but I guess applications of risk-taking can be cool. All of this like data layer, availability stuff, blah, blah, the big narratives, right? They are interesting, they're not bullshit, but they're abstract. And again, on the topic of users, adoption and whatnot, doesn't exactly help directly. It helps indirectly by making infra better for apps being built, but what all industries initially do when they're young is they forget that somebody needs to use it, right?
Yeah, so I think the build and they will come mentality maybe is...
It's not that anybody really believes in it. Like I've never seen a person believe that the build and come mentality will work out. There is a stigma for that, right? But no, teams understand that's not going to happen. It's just that it's not like they can do much with it, right? They need to build their protocol layer or want to or need 50-50, let's take so, right? They don't have enough resources or funding to also do things on top. So
how do we drive adoption then?
Let other people take care of it. I mean, jokes aside, EF spends some time on it, right? Because you care about the vision and the really such things apart from the money-driven questions once you have the luxury to think about them. When you're a startup and you need to raise, you kind of have to target first the fundraise. And then the second one maybe as well to capitalize better. If you get that to that point, and you do have the time and the resource to think about adoption and like application layer, whatever your users, you will do that. They just many don't reach that state. And you kind of cannot start there because it needs capital. For example, you could of course start there. If you take grants from, let's say, big layer 1, layer 2, layer 2s, right, you take grants, but there is one thing to take a 50K grant vested for a year and just do some fugazi narrative on the infra layer and raise 1 million right away. Like even if you're very honest, why the hell would you say no to the latter, right? Absolutely. You can still do the latter and then try to do the former. But it's like, I guess, with politics a little bit. I'm going to be the best politician, right? I'm going to save the world, feed everybody who is hungry. And then once on the process of getting to the official, post, right, seat, the journey, and then after you are there, you realize, first of all, you cannot really do anything you promised. And then you are not spoiled, but more so, you have other things to take care about. And then you just literally fail the people who had the trust in you. Right. Partly due to your own fault and incentives, partly due to you actually not being able to just fix all of it. Mm-hmm. So I guess you can turn these problems into common problems. like Ethereum Foundation is doing. There are a bunch of, I like account abstraction. I'm not talking about 4337 standards or whatever. I'm not technical to know the difference by heart. But it makes sense that a wallet would have social recovery, and would it make you have a seed phrase? That totally makes sense, right? Yeah. But then you have the questions, though, is mass adoption would probably be Samsung and Amazon phones having wallets by default, right? Which is totally not decentralized. So should you really be building towards that, or just wait for them to come and you can just focus on the really decentralized stuff? Like torrent, right? With the torrents and whatever, with privacy, people who care about self-custody, privacy, whatever, like what is it? I don't know the stats, but like it's less than 1%, right? Much, much, much less. So at some point, people think about the big money, and that is often not decentralized, not self-custody. It's a one button, it's very slick, but behind it, there is practically no blockchain, no crypto, whatever.
Okay, just before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you where we can stay updated on Gearbox's progress.
The usual social media, right? The Twitters of this world. What we do cool, though, is we do monthly reports on all this stuff that has been done in that month and the money that was spent. Because all of except the initial round, which was like a seed round that was spent fully on initial developers and audits, everything that was raised after that was in the DAO. So you can see from the treasury money going somewhere, where it goes for, how much it goes for.
I'd like to ask you if you've got any final remarks, perhaps about Istanbul, the events that have been happening here, the future of crypto, your favorite aspect of having spent a week here. Any closing remarks?
Istanbul was quite a culture shock for me, because I was in Amsterdam and Dubai for the past couple of years, which everyone's it's very peace. I don't go out that much, so everything's very peaceful, boomer even, which is not good. It's just that what is something I've been exposed to in the past few years. And then Istanbul is a very lively city. People, because it's more of a southern nation, like Spain to an extent, right? Italy, south, they're more passionate, really. At first, you can take it as rudeness or something, but no, it's quite often just passion and people just like caring about many things more so than people, let's say, in Switzerland or Netherlands do, which are very just like reserved, right? That was quite a culture shock, but again, after 5 days, I get used to it much more. So I would come back for that purpose, but do more cultural stuff next time. On the events, no, I think Ethereum events are great. There is a good degree of people understanding the narratives, as well as they just building the stuff they like, as well as just the VC-oriented stuff. So I would say it's a good mix. There is no too much stuff that is like too futuristic, and there is no too much stuff that just money focused. It's a good in between. I wouldn't change anything for that. It's always fun, always different groups of people, so that's cool. I would always come back, yeah. On the space in general, I don't think anything is being done wrong right now per se. I would say there are teams focused on many different aspects, and it's much more diverse in terms of like what has been built and worked on than before. So it's infra, it's application layers, whatever. To a large extent, it's because, startups doing well when there is money. So because there is more money, people don't have to think about, I need to scam 10K over there tomorrow, right, just to make my ends meet and pay the developers. You can take a bit of a longer trajectory. But because there are also, not everybody has 100 million in treasury, they also don't think 10 years ahead, some think 2, right? So there is a degree of like, we need to think within the next half a year, within the next 2, within the next 4, within the next 10. So as such, it makes it diverse enough, basically, as a whole. So I wouldn't change anything there. Yeah, pretty positive on the space. There is, of course, a large degree of it is the hypothetical ethos-driven stuff related to adoption, and that is very much related to regulation. People who are seasonal in the space, or not in the space, like seasonal in terms of like other industries, they all have the same opinion, is that take it 2-5 years from now, all of the wallets will be just pre-made Samsung wallet and pre-made Apple wallet. And whatever wallets we have today will be like tiny niche ones. Same goes for protocols. In the protocols, I guess you can argue a bit more that if regulation somehow allows for its open protocols to be actually not controllable, but the interfaces to be controllable, which is, I think, the best way to be in, then you can still have huge banks deposit the money into Curve and Uniswap. That'll be fantastic. It's a bit of a pipe dream because probably they will just remake everything for themselves, but there's a good degree of that not happening as well. But probably 90% of stuff will be Apple and Samsung wallet within a controlled roll-up, which is KYC'd, and everything will be exactly the same there. But what is important is that the people, we are now, everybody in this event, majority, right? The niche that we are in will stay a niche, but it will be a niche not with 10,000 people, but a niche with 1 million people, and the capital base won't be like 1 trillion today, but 10 trillion. So it will be a niche compared to the stock market or the gold market or the real estate market. but it will be a niche big enough to have a global impact on communities, creators, and whoever else who could benefit from it. So again, stay in a niche, but a pretty fucking big niche. So let's just keep it that way. You can always, I think you cannot sit on 2 chairs at once, but you can let your friend sit on another chair.